Um, so what are we going to do today? We're looking into online quality assurance because that's something we have all had to become familiar with in one way or another in the past year. And we are sharing a few experiences from some of ENQA's members in this context. And we made a call ahead of the members forum or General Assembly week we had at the end of April, and received a lot of excellent proposals for these brief presentations. So we already held one webinar of this kind, and now this is our second one. So we have 6 very short presentations, so 5-7 minutes, so kind of quick snapshots into one specific element or dimension of online quality assurance. So the idea is not really to give you exhaustive explanation of how an agency does online quality assurance as a whole, but specific ideas on perhaps related to the experts or a specific method used or some lessons learned, etc. So it hopefully gives you a lot of ideas, and please feel absolutely free to contact any of the speakers or put your additional comments or questions into the chat if you'd like to learn more. We'll pause for just a little moment after each input presentation from the speakers. And at that point, we can take 1 or 2 questions that are directly related to the content of that presentation. So prepare those in time and put them into the chat as well, and I'll be picking them up from there. And then at the end, we have about 20 minutes for a discussion of more overarching or generic topics. So think also about those while we speak. So that's all kind of from the technical side, and I'd be happy now to start with the first actual presentation of this morning, which is called Unexpected Lessons Learned: Providing Guidelines and Inspiration in Times of Pandemic by Isabel Ortega and Eva Sanchez from ACPUA in Spain. Please go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Maria. Good morning to all the attendees. It's a pleasure to be here today. Thanks to ENQA for organizing this webinar and for providing this forum for members and affiliates to share experiences. The goal of our presentation is to be a reflection on the experience that we have lived, and certainly with many elements in common within the agencies. I remember, well, we remember the news coming from China about how the virus was spreading. However, the feeling was that the pandemic came suddenly and we had to adapt to working from home from one day to the next. Technology becomes essential. Also, like most of you, we were already working with technological resources, and we had to act quickly to deal with the new situation in the best way possible. The pandemic has also highlighted the importance of networks through different paths, but in the same direction. That's what we feel, even more like a real network that feels the desire to share our experiences or success and mistake or novelties or innovation, to learn from each other and to continue improving. We must not forget that the network is an element of protection, which prevents faults thanks to the interaction of all the nodes of which it's made up. Next, please.
No, sorry. Come back to the previous
sorry.
slide. Okay, now. Thank you. The lessons learned are many and different, but we have identified 5 areas which are connected. First one, regulatory guidance. With the pandemic situation, official bodies and institutions, both at national and international level, developed new indications, recommendations, guidelines to organize the way to act and to guarantee always the maintenance of quality standards. 2, providing guidelines. Based on these previous guidelines or common guidelines, like most agencies, the APO also draws up its guide for online site visits, which we apply to all our evaluation processes. And now, yes, next, please.
Okay, technological devices. While technology is not new for us, but resources that we use from time to time, such as the Zoom, Meet, or Wonder, have become essential. In our case, we use Zoom as a virtual office as we are continuously connected during the working day. It even allows us to have a coffee break. It is the platform we also use for visits, training sessions, or meeting with the stakeholders. Since 2018, we have been using Trello platform for collaborative work with staff, stakeholders, and reviewers. And thanks to this, the pandemic has not disrupted this way of working. WhatsApp is also become very important because it's a quick way of communication. Even our literary donkey, a pen drawing by Francisco de Goya, that it is the image of our slogan, the Apua Learns, has also adapted to new technologies by using headphones. You can see it in the image. Well, for the flexible work and remote working entered in the scene, well, we couldn't have done all this alone. Once again, the network was essential, and we opened forums to meet with different groups to receive their impressions, their opinions, their needs, their difficulties, and how to find solutions together. We would like to highlight the communication with the students through strategic forums as a part of the APUA students program.
Well, and finally, 5, a new attitude. A new attitude to face all these quick and complex changes. A new attitude that we have been applying, I'm sure we all have been applying and developing, but many times without realizing it. I'm sure that are many more, but we would like to highlight a few. Being able to adapt, we have developed this ability to face our work in a different way, ensuring always the same efficiency and commitment to quality, maintaining the peace at work, and why not to say it, energy, enthusiasm, and good sense of humor, sometimes quite difficult in this situation. Communication, we have learned to talk with our face as we have lost body language. To keep a strict tone of a speech, as these kind of videos do not facilitate interaction. To debate by chat, as we all are invited to do today. To be punctual, avoiding the contemporary expression. And in brief, to apply some kind of swing in our speeches. Teamwork at staff level to set up teleworking with national and international agencies. In fact, this participation in webinars are a way too of teamwork. And enhancing our creativity, devising new ways to ensure that the new situation is not seen or lived as a set of difficulties, but as an unreal opportunity to develop and maintain our essence. Examples many: after work, breakout rooms, coffee work, or recording videos of the institutions, many creative and great ideas. Next, please.
Well, finally, we have defined 10 commandments for staff and reviewers, which aim to catch the essence of the unexpected lesson learned in terms of pandemic for the APUA. You will probably feel identified with some of these 10 commandments. In any case, the aim is quite out of everything to make you smile. 1, I will ensure ESG compliance. 2, I will not change the substance of evaluation, but only the form. 3, I will work with powerful and shared electronic platforms. 4, I will be adaptable to online platforms. 5, I won't be afraid of internet connection tests and I will have a B plan. 6, I won't keep the microphone open if I'm not speaking. 7, I will organize as many coordination meetings as necessary. 8, I will be patient with technology and with no technologists. 9, if it works, why change it? And 10, I will end the online meetings with a smile. And in fulfillment of this last commitment, thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much. That was a very nice way to pass the message and walk the talk. So do as you preach. That was good reminder for us all. Are there any questions directly to Akwa, or you'd like to keep your questions for the discussion at the end? I think we are ready to go ahead. Thank you very much, Akwa colleagues. And next we have Murray Gold from QQI Ireland on adapting training for a happy virtual external review team. So Marie, please go ahead.
Good morning. Thank you, Maria, and good morning, everyone. And to Anna and indeed to ENQA colleagues for facilitating this webinar. It's a great opportunity for us to share some of our experiences and indeed to learn from other agencies. I think we've definitely will pick up something from the 10 commandments. So thank you for that. So a bit like other agencies with the QQI, we had to adapt and move very quickly our virtual processes, not just with external reviews, with quality assurance approval and with program accreditation. But today I'm going to focus on a very specific aspect, which is creating a happy virtual review team. Some of the challenges that we've identified, some of the lessons that we've learned, some adaptations that we continue to make, and indeed some plans that we have in the coming months. I suppose just to start with some of the challenges, and this reflects presentation from earlier colleagues around the remote working challenges. When we started with our virtual review teams, I suppose what we didn't take into account or take cognizance of was that indeed reviewers were now no longer on site. So it was becoming more challenging for reviewers to switch off from their day job. So when reviewers would come to Ireland and spend the week in the institution, they were very much on site and physically present and mentally present. So I think the remote working challenges has really created for reviewers, creates huge pressures in terms of the work balance. When you commit to a review, I might just go back to seems to have hopped ahead. So there was the challenges of the day job and indeed the other distractions of working from homes, or reviewers themselves who had the demands of homeschool, education and dogs and you know, everything else, postmen knocking during a stakeholder meeting. So I suppose all of those distractions when we started the process, we haven't factored into our guidelines. So that was one of the challenges that became apparent. The second was I suppose and again it relates, I suppose, to the workload for reviewers, is the need for more advanced planning. I think previous colleagues in the presentation mentioned more coordination. Because the team are not together, there were more opportunities for more frequent meetings. But of course, review team members have commented that has created quite an additional workload in terms of the commitment. And the last, of course, is the technology and connectivity. And not all review team members are always comfortable with the technology, or indeed live in areas where perhaps connectivity, where they have good connectivity. So these are, I suppose, some of the challenges that we, having initially moved to the virtual process, that as we began to work with different review teams, and we moved from our, I suppose, operational focus on the guidelines and process focus to looking at some of the more nuancing challenges around the process. Can move on to the next slide, please. Thank you. So some of the lessons learned then in this process. One is the chair. Really, the role of the chair is critical, and we really, I think, have learned that it's really important that to have an experienced chair. It's really important that the chair is comfortable in a virtual platform and in chairing in a virtual platform. In our earlier discussions, we talked about some of the advantages of that with the panel. So Maria can mute us or Anna can mute us, so it can be more controlled for the chair. But indeed, it is a challenge to chair both with the review team and with stakeholders. And it's very important, I suppose, that the chair sets a tone of empathy with the review team and with stakeholders. Of course, some of these lessons apply to an on-site visit, but they seem to have been magnified more within the virtual platform. The other role of the chair, of course, is in meeting protocols and ensuring, as we heard in some of the earlier presentations, that review team members turn up on time, that they don't maybe drink their coffee or eat their bananas or apples on camera. That when you're on camera, I think people forget sometimes that you're visible, you are on camera, and people can see you. So the role of the chair is really critical, and the meeting protocols around you know, do you introduce the team each time? Do you have camera on and camera off? And we've had these debates about if the camera is off, then the team is invisible, but yet the team wants to see stakeholders, and there may be a limited scope on cameras. So they've been some of the lessons learned that we've been working through. The team planning with the review team is really essential. What we have been enabled to do with the virtual process, of course, is have more additional meetings, but we really have had to ensure that we build private team meeting time into the schedule. It really is important to do that. And we've had to develop additional guidelines and templates to support the team. The agency staff play a critical role, and perhaps more so than even on the on-site. They really are, you know, very much a support function for the external review team. And we have our agency staff at all of the stakeholder meetings. They provide support for the virtual platforms, for the documentation management, the technical support, the plan B, as was mentioned earlier. If something goes wrong with the technology, it really is the agency staff that play a critical role in that. So as well as guidelines for our review team, and indeed for our stakeholders, we have also developed internal guidelines for staff, for agency staff that will be supporting the process. It's very important, we've learned to create opportunities for some social interaction, the virtual coffee breaks, and really the review team do miss out on that, and they miss out on that interaction, I guess, with the institution also. So those virtual social interactions, as distinct from the work team meetings, are very important. The next slide, please. Thank you. So some adaptations and plans. We've a longer list here, and our adaptations really are we've built in the feedback from review teams. We've completed now 3 higher education or reviews of higher education institutions, and by the end of June we will have 5. We will have completed 5 reviews of vocational education training providers, quite large vocational education training institutions and providers. So we're very much taking on board the feedback from the review team. And I'm mindful of my time, really. You're going to stop me very soon, but I suppose in our adaptations and plans and in our training, we're finding that we're having to highlight some of the health and care elements around the review teams, around that remote working, the need to remind the team members that kind of getting up and taking the break and standing, doing some exercises at their desk or whatever it is. But the need, I suppose, to take on that kind of health and care and health and safety element, which we haven't had to do so much with the on-site visit. We've stressed the importance of an empathetic atmosphere with stakeholders. And interesting, what the virtual process has allowed us to do is to engage with the stakeholders more easily in getting some feedback. So our learner focus sessions, for example, have flagged, that the review teams should be very mindful of over-academic or corporate management style language when they're engaging with learners and stakeholders. And I suppose in the past on the on-site visits, we would have been more removed from our learners, but we've been able to follow up with them now through the virtual processes. We developed a live but flexible bank of questions as review team members can use. And we have split the training where previously we had a full day. We've actually split it now into a number of half-day sessions. And we're looking at perhaps, more networking opportunities of getting the chairs and review team members together themselves. So I suppose we're exploring that. We've developed a bit like the 10 Commandments, a kind of a one-page, or we are developing cheat sheet for meetings. A reminder about I mentioned earlier, meeting etiquette and no apples or bananas on camera. And we really have had to highlight the workload at the recruitment stage. We've had to really emphasize this is, you are committed for the week. It is a big undertaking. We've had to highlight that. In terms of our future plans, we are rolling out an online, more interactive platform for management of our review process. We currently use SharePoint, but we have a lot of work done on that. And we are beginning to, hopefully explore the development of more interactive training material and use maybe of alternative platforms. I think ENQA have actually used this Wonder, an online platform for maybe networking opportunities, and this was mentioned earlier at the previous presentation. We would be very open to collaborative projects with other agencies or within the network to look at some interactive review team training material, incorporating the adaptations which I mentioned. So, and these apply, I think, across the board. I know we all work within slightly different legislative contexts and jurisdictions, but there is, I suppose, a generic element to the training. So we'd very much welcome any interest in partners on a collaborative project in exploring, I suppose, the use of alternative platforms to enhance the review team training and create a happy review team. Thank you, Maria. I know I went to
Thank you, Marie. Thank you so much. And it's very nice to end this presentation with kind of an invitation for collaboration. So feel free to get in contact with Marie if you'd be interested in developing something like that together, because I think that is a very nice idea. I have spotted some questions. There is a lot of discussion going on in the chat on how to split the site visit, also not to kind of have 2 long days on the screen, maybe take into consideration different time zones of experts. So you're free to, everybody, follow that discussions in the chat. I've also spotted some questions, but I think they're quite generic. There is a question of how about the future, and we'll be picking up that at the very end in the general discussion. I don't see direct questions there for Marie, but I will just mention something myself in case somebody wants to write a question there. I saw also a question of other commitments, and I think that picks up quite well on Marie, your point that there is this danger that people feel that when you go on a site visit someplace, you really book those 3 days and you're there. And there is little else that you can do or you are expected to do on those days. And there is a risk that while we are online, when there is the lunch break, there is suddenly another meeting of another totally different activity for the experts. And I think that is quite a big risk. So I think the kind of commitment for that site visit for those days is a very important point to underline, and other commitments should really be put on aside for that period. Okay, no direct questions for you, so we'll move on and we'll have all the questions and discussions at the end then. So next we have Maria Ángeles Serrano Garcia from ANECA in Spain, who will talk about the virtual audits of the international quality labels programs and how that has happened in the times of pandemic. So please, the floor is yours, Maria.
Thank you, Maria. Good morning to all the attendees, and thank you to ENQA for organizing this webinar and giving us the opportunity to participate in order to share our experience and to learn from others. I believe that in this time, in this sudden unfortunate pandemic time, all agencies have had to adapt their procedures in order not to slow down or damage any evaluation process. What I'd like to share with you all is our pilot project of virtual visits in ANECA's International Quality Labels Program. Next slide, please. Within the ANECA International Quality Labels Program, we have EURACE for engineering degrees, EUROIN for IT degrees, and EUROLabels for chemistry degrees. In addition, ANECA has launched its own international label on online and hybrid learning called ENQA. In the pilot project that I'm sharing with you, we designed 4 phases: a contingency plan, the design of an action plan, the implementation of the plan, and the analysis of the results. Next slide, please. The first step was the design of a contingency plan necessary to respond to the mobility restrictions in which we found ourselves. To draw this plan, 160 experts and evaluators were consulted, and we asked them about possible incidents to take into account in virtual visits, solutions to the problems detected in the first item, recommendation of good practices to apply in these virtual visits. Then we design an action plan, but before we need the approval by the European agencies that are the proprietors of the quality labels that I have mentioned before. Next slide, please. In the implementation plan, draw a specific training session for virtual visits to that was aimed for evaluators, informative technical meetings with universities, and we draw a decalogue of frequently asked questions that is a document for universities and evaluators. Then we analyze the results of 55 training programs that were evaluated, distributed in 23 Spanish universities as one Mexican university. And then we analyze those results. We make a self-evaluation. We get a positive feedback from 160 experts and evaluators and 24 universities. And then with all these ideas, we update our document of frequently asked questions that we have provided to universities, and we are going to apply these new ideas and improvements to the new virtual audits that are scheduled for April to September of 2021. And our main recommendations are besides for virtual visits, besides finishing with a smile, as Aqua told us, it's very important that make connection tests before the visits, and the evaluator should have experience in virtual meeting platforms. And this is related with the specific training sessions that we usually organize. Next slide, please. Thank you for your attention. And again, thank you to ENQA.
Thank you very much for your presentation. I think it's very interesting to hear these. You were responding, maybe not knowing it, to some of the questions that were coming up in the chat related to if there need for special training for experts for online visits. And I think you partly responded to that. And I think others have also touched upon that. We'll pick up that question at the very end again.
Thank you, Maria.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Maria Angeles? Oh, no, there's a big question. I'll have to read it. Yeah, that's not directly related to yours, so we'll pick up those and have them in the discussion at the end. Next up is Jolanta Silka from AIC in Latvia, talking about how the COVID-19 pandemic has been a catalyst for greater use of ICT for assessment purposes. So Jolanta, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you. Hello, everyone. It's my pleasure to share with you our experience during COVID time. And in my presentation, I will give you a short insight how the pandemic facilitates the use of information technologies for assessment purposes in Latvia. Next slide, please. And before March 2020, actually, we haven't used online assessment. We have experience only with on-site assessments. And when the emergency situation was announced in Latvia, we paused for a while. So we had to decide what to do next. And but already in April, we changed the on-site visits to online, only for one assessment procedure for licensing. And but for accreditation of study fields, we took a little bit longer pause, and so that we could analyze the first results of online visits for licensing. And we analyze what are the risks and other things. And as the situation was unstable and every week were some changes or new restrictions which should be taken into account, we decided to define three types of assessment visits. The first one is on-site traditional assessment visit. The next one is partially online, where international experts participate online, but local expert and our assessment coordinator participate physically at the university. And the third type is a fully online when no one has possibility to participate on site at the university. But at the same time, we use that our assessment coordinator always tried to participate physically at the university. And by accepting this model, we became more flexible and were able to adapt to the changeable situations. And of course, we put some technical requirements both for universities and for assessment experts. And in addition, universities should always prepare in advance high quality videos about their material and technical base, and it should be available for experts prior to the visit, so that experts could get introduced with this video and ask for some additional clarifications. And sometimes the overview of technical and informative base at the university was live streamed by our assessment coordinator or by university staff, which also worked quite well. And next slide, please. And well, before the COVID period, almost all activities in our agency were on site, and but now during the COVID and now we organized many activities online, like experts training, assessment visits, and during the COVID, and we continue to work with experts online. And before the assessment visit, we usually have more than one Zoom meeting with experts. The first Zoom meeting usually is like introductory meeting, and the next Zoom meeting is for to discuss assessment purposes and assessment context, and the others Zoom meetings are more for clarifications and some technical issues. And in such way, we are more confident that experts are well prepared for assessment visits. And we also rearrange assessment visit, the schedule of the visit, in order to have more time for experts' internal discussions and feedback between the interviews and at the beginning and at the ending of each assessment day. And in addition, we have online feedback sessions between experts and the agency during the drafting of the assessment report. So that assessment report does not have many factual errors or misclarifications. That's why we organize several online meetings during experts' rights as a report. Also, this Zoom meetings is a good platform for experts' discussions if there are some arguments on assessment criteria. Usually, we propose experts to have such Zoom online meetings, but sometimes experts group chair or experts group secretaries, they initiate such meetings. So we put communication, internal communication, only on the e-platform, on the online meetings. Could you please the next slide? And as you can see from this slide, we organized quite many assessment visits, and in licensing, mostly fully online visits were organized, and the evaluation of study field, we prefer to organize semi-remote or partially online visits. And after each assessment, we gather feedback both from experts, from higher education institutions, and also from our assessment coordinators. And higher education institution really appreciated changes in the methodology and flexibility in the mode of assessment visits. And they are sure that it is possible to comprehensively assess infrastructure and material and technical equipment of the university. In some point, experts agree with the university and that institutions are able to provide sufficient online demonstration of infrastructure, and they were able to fully participate and express their opinion during the visit. But it should be noted that the experts are not so favor as universities to keep the concept of fully or partially online visits. So they prefer more traditional on-site visits. And I should say that we, as an agency, we agree in this point more with experts. And in the future, fully online site visits will normally not to be continued, only in some extreme emergency situations. Currently, we keep assessment visits partially online, but we hope that one day we could return to on-site traditional visits. And of course, we will modify on-site visit at the same time, because we continue communicate with experts online before the visit, and we continue to use online communication with experts during the drafting the reports. Well, that's from my side. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Jolanta. Thank you. That's very interesting. And there is a question related to what you have just explained. And that regards, you have actually now been doing 3 different types of visits or processes: semi-remote, fully remote, and on-site. And how do you decide which one to use? Do the institutions have they shown a preference, or do they have any say in that? And also, how do they feel about there being these different approaches at the same time?
Thank you for the question. Yes, of course, we agreed before the assessment visit. We agreed with firstly with experts, and then we also discussed these options with universities. It depends very much on the circumstances, on the situation in the country. For example, last year, it was possible to have international experts from Lithuania and Estonia, and also some experts from Finland were able to come to Riga. But later on, it was not possible. That's why we agreed very much before the visit with institution and with experts.
Okay, so it's mainly related to the historical moment during that year, rather than that at every moment you would have the same processes. Okay, good, thank you. I hope that was clear to Christina from EQ Austria, who asked that question. There are some questions coming in the chat, which I try to pick up for the discussion later on. There are also speakers, some questions directed to you, which I might be able to pick up orally as well in a moment, but just in case, if you want to respond to them on the chat, please go ahead. Thank you again, Jolanta. And next we have pros and cons of hybrid site visits by the Turkish Higher Education Quality Council, and that's Aslihan Nazir, who will be presenting. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Maria. Dear all, a great and warm hello from Cloud Istanbul to everyone watching this presentation, this webinar. Many thanks to ENQA for organizing this webinar. My name is Aslihan Nazir, and I'm a member of Turkish Higher Education Quality Council. Today, I will make a presentation about the pros and cons of hybrid site visits. Next slide, please. Okay, in Turkey, it is mandatory for higher education institutions by law to prepare institutional self-evaluation reports annually. And the evaluation teams that are trained and formed by TXE make site visits to higher education institutions at least once in every 5 years under the institutional external evaluation and institutional accreditation programs. At the end of these site visits, the evaluation teams prepare institutional feedback reports or institutional accreditation reports. By 2020, unfortunately, these site visits are started to be carried out by using a hybrid approach to the pandemic, due to the pandemic. Next slide, please. Actually, TXE has been conducting institutional external evaluation programs since 2016. And by 2020, we have introduced both institutional accreditation program and institutional follow-up program. Actually, institutional follow-up program is carried out fully online, whereas both institutional external evaluation and institutional accreditation programs consist of 1 day online pre-visit, 1.5 day online site visit, and only the last part consists of 1.5 day face-to-face site visits. Next slide, please. Okay, thank you. Now, based on the principle of continuous improvement, we regularly take feedbacks from both managers, rectors of higher education institutions, and leaders of the evaluation team. At the beginning of 2021, we have conducted interviews with both higher education institutions managers, rectors, and team leaders about their experiences regarding hybrid site visits. It is observed that hybrid site visits have some unique benefits despite their challenges. When we dive into the depths of these interviews, it is seen that the team members came together more frequently, both prior to the site visit and during the site visit, which increased the effectiveness as well as the efficiency of their meetings. Secondly, from time to time, due to their heavy or tight schedules, rectors of the higher education institutions could not fully attend and participate those site visits. But the flexibility of these online platforms also resolve this issue. And thirdly, it is observed that during online meetings, all of the participants were more willing to talk and share their opinions than compared to traditional normal face-to-face meetings. And this leads to an increased interaction between the team members and participants of institutions. Online platforms give an increased opportunity to every member of the evaluation teams to write and share their opinions. Hence, at the end, increased participatory report writing has been achieved by the teams as well. And finally, online platforms lead to a decrease in expenses such as accommodation, transportation, as well as printing of documents and some other relevant costs. Yet, besides all these benefits, there are some challenges as well. The first is related with inadequacy of internet infrastructure, connection problems, or inability of users to use some features of online platforms are among the most frequently referred infrastructural or technical problems. In addition, some of the higher education institutions are requested to record the meetings, which may lead to participants being less comfortable to share their opinions, to express themselves. And it may also lead to a violation of privacy issue as well. And another problem is related with time management. Since, as you know, there is no location or time boundaries, the participants, particularly coming from higher education institutions, were more willing to talk. They talk more and more, and it became a little difficult to interrupt them during online, using online platforms. And finally, the most crucial part is related with the behavioral dimension, which becomes more vital while using online platforms. Hence, the duty and the responsibility of the teams, particularly team leaders, increases. The management skills of the team leaders have gained utmost importance in terms of the objectivity principle, providing increased participation, and the quality of the interactions, just supporting the quality of interaction patterns are among the different parties during online meetings becomes extremely crucial. But to wrap up, we can say that TXT will continue to integrate online platforms to our site visits even after the pandemic. Next slide, please. Actually, I would like to thank everyone for your time and patience. We are very pleased to share our hybrid site visit experiences with our colleagues. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That was a very interesting presentation and an insight into how you're dealing with this online visits. Are there any direct questions? Probably you recognize many of the pros and cons that were listed. I will just have a look at the chat to make sure that I'm not missing any questions.
There are some comments, I think.
There are some comments. By the way, I would like to just remind everybody that if you want to respond to everybody or write a question to everybody, please use all panelists and attendees. Otherwise, it's only the panelists that will see either your response or your question. Okay, thank you very much, Aslian. We have had a lot of discussion in the meantime in the chat about whether to record or not to record the online meetings. And this is seems to be like an eternal question. We have that discussion every time we talk about these meetings. And clearly, we have the two schools. Some who said, yes, we record it, it's just for note taking. Others say, absolutely, we cannot because of data protection, because of ensuring that the participants feel really free to express themselves, etc. So there's all kind of reasons there, and please take part in the chat if you want to have a look at that more in detail. Thanks very much. And then we are ready to move. Let me just see that there is not. Yes, that was just a thank you. Next and final input before we proceed to a discussion at the end. And that is by Lali Georgidze and Anka Greer from the Georgian Quality Assurance Agency. And they will talk about developing quality assurance for online higher education in Georgia for the post-pandemic. So what is the new normal and how do we go forward from this situation? Okay, the floor is yours, Lali. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Maria, and hello, everyone. So as Maria said today, I, with Anka Greer, would like to present Georgia's experience for online quality assurance for the post-pandemic new normal. And we also see this presentation as a springboard for discussion on post-pandemic implications of higher education quality assurance. Okay, next slide, please. This period has been particularly challenging for higher education sector in Georgia, and this was due to the lack of experience in online delivery of study programs because of certain legislative restrictions that we have in place in Georgia. However, this pandemic has opened up new windows of opportunities, and in collaboration with the East-West Management Institute and USAID, we initiated a project to support quality of online delivery through future systemic decisions at the sectorial and institutional levels in Georgia. So now I give floor over to Anka, who will speak on the outcomes of this very project that we think may be relevant for quality assurance of online teaching and learning in other contexts outside Georgia too. So please, Anka.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Lali, and thank you, colleagues at ENQA, for allowing us to talk about this important project. Indeed, as Lali has said, the project was initiated mainly because the Georgian context did not have by legislation the opportunity to engage with online education prior to the pandemic. So at the time of the lockdown, or the first lockdown, basically what happened was, for all higher education institutions across Georgia, this was a very, very new endeavor. And it was the wish of the agency to be prepared in case legislation might change, in case government might want to change perspective, and in the future allow for online education to be taken forward by higher education institutions. Now, the project started off as developing an additional layer of criteria for the existing authorization standards. And we were thinking that this would be almost exclusively in the benefit of external quality assurance arrangements. But as the project developed, we realized that it's equally relevant, or even more so, I think, in the conversations we had with higher education institutions, that they realize what the requirements are should they wish to embrace online delivery, and that the ministry also acknowledges what sort of investment was required at national level if this particular initiative were to be taken forward. Next slide, please. So all criteria are equal, we have to say this, but obviously we realized as we were working through the detail that some of the criteria really required more priority. Thank you for that. So in a way, in conversation with higher education institutions and with colleagues in the agency, we realized immediately that there were elements very important to online delivery that were not being considered as important at the time. So that column that you now see there is actually, we've listed some of the elements which we branded as more risky, simply because there was less awareness of the fact that they needed attention at that point in time. And I'll just take out a few of them. So one of the elements which was quite interesting was that higher education institutions were not really considering that there might need to be a mission or a vision shift should they wish to take on online education. So it almost seemed like they would continue on without any change or any reflection that would have impact at the level of the mission. The idea that there needed to be articulation, realistic articulation of the rationale for continuation of online education, again, seemed very alien at the time of our conversations with higher education institutions. And it also, even though higher education institutions were looking to update policies, they weren't considering the need for new policies to come into existence that would serve exclusively the purpose of online education. And looking at interdependencies or adjustments for quality assurance, and even the interplay between face-to-face and online delivery, where programs, the same program, was likely to be delivered in both modes, were things that were not being actively or proactively considered at the time, which is why they're in this particular column where we thought actually these criteria are there, but there would need to be specific guidance to draw the attention of higher education institutions that they needed to put emphasis before they made a decision for online delivery. Some of the elements which were really interesting had to do with the fact that higher education institutions were not considering to redesign programs for online delivery. So they would still want to work with the, let's say, the morphed version that the pandemic sustained, which could not accommodate both synchronous and asynchronous activities in the way that we believed was right to do so, and in the way that could sustain quality for the online element. So really, the recommendation came forward that a full replanning of programs needed to happen across teaching, learning, and assessment for things to be put in perspective. Workloads, again, refining that matrix that would incorporate synchronous and asynchronous elements was extremely important. And the last 3 bullet points, so data protection, appeal procedures, and closure procedures relating to sustainability of what would be the online program in the future, were really not at the forefront of any debate. They were simply not being considered at all. So in that respect, quite risky if left unconsidered in the future. Next, please. But importantly, of course, higher education institutions and the agency were aware of elements that were already being given attention. And some of these had to do with the fact that the management structure and responsibilities were being updated, were being refined for online delivery. As I said previously, policies and procedures were being revised, but revised and updated, basically adding on elements rather than creating something that would sustain online delivery as a new endeavor for the future. There was, of course, and we acknowledge this, investment in infrastructure, investment in upskilling of staff through CPD arrangements, more technical support being put in place, more focus on teaching methodologies, new teaching methodologies, and an attempt to balance some of the synchronous and asynchronous activities. It was clearly identified that work-based learning, assessments, and psychological support were the areas that had most issues at the time of our conversations, and higher education institutions were trying to find ways of addressing those particular issues and solutions that would allow for things to, let's say, sustain quality in the way that they wanted quality sustained. So we've classed these as, let's say, less risky because there was more awareness of the fact that they needed attention, and attention was already provided in that particular direction. So if we kind of look at these 2 columns, what we can say is that higher education institutions in Georgia clearly are paying attention to quality elements, and they're prioritizing some over others. There needs to be a rebalancing, we believe, in order for all of the criteria to be addressed, to be given the attention that they need before a decision for online delivery can take place. Next, please. So what does the post-pandemic future look like? Obviously, we can't read into the future. I think all of us have thought that maybe even last September, we'd be back in schools and be able to do things in different ways, but this has not happened. So the Georgian context at this current point in time can envisage online components or even full online delivery being retained for some of the programs. Staff and students who we spoke to as part of this project feel more knowledgeable, more equipped, and more confident to take on online delivery. And there is a clear sense of the fact that momentum should not be lost for growth. Looking at all of these lessons as opportunity for growth and trying to see exactly how online might facilitate sustainability in the future. Next, please. But really very important is the fact that there need to be some clear strategic decisions, and these would have to distinguish. This is my minute,
yes.
Yes, thank you. This is my last comment, actually. So strategic decisions which would have to distinguish between what could be increased or intensified digitalization or technologization, whatever we want to call it, or whether there is a move towards online blended delivery proper. A clear distinction also between the fact that between the COVID variant of online delivery and proper planned embedded online delivery and how these would take shape. And also a discussion, very focused discussion on the level of investment required in comparison to targeted institutional gains that higher education institutions might at this point in time see coming their way. Now, importantly, once these decisions are made, we believe that the NCEQE, so the agency, through these conversations with the ministry, with stakeholders, with higher education institutions, is in a very, very good position to support its sector for the delivery of quality online education and for the external quality assurance of online education in a future where legislation might allow for this to happen in Georgia. Thank you very much. I do want to thank and credit my colleague Fiona Crozier, whose collaboration was very important on this particular project, and also, of course, all the colleagues in the agency, the stakeholders, the institutions that have given us really valuable insight to be able to develop these criteria. Thank you very much, Maria.
Thank you very much, Anka and Lali, for this presentation and for these insights. Now we do have some time for questions and discussion, and I have picked up quite some wide, interesting questions in the chat, but also some specific ones for some of the speakers. And I would start with a specific one. Marie, if you are there, yes, you are there. You spoke about these distractions. So, you know, there is the doorbell, there's the postman, there are the kids, there's the dog, there's the cat, you know, whatever, there's your email, there is so many things that you have to, you know, combat against, and your attention has to be focused. How do you actually, do you have any good tips on how do you keep those reviewers focused, or do you just appeal on their kind of goodwill to try to eliminate the distractions?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think it's a challenge, and I suppose when the review teams that we are working with now committed to the process, to what they thought would be an on-site process. So they committed, you know, maybe 12 months ago, or you know, they did not envisage at this stage they would still be doing a virtual process. We have integrated now within our training. We do remind them this is a commitment. We're very mindful in the recruitment process, and we remind them that, you know, any private review team time or any downtime, they should really use that to take some space and a headspace from the review process. So I suppose we have very much built in those reminders into our training process. But it's a challenge. I think those competing demands just leads to a very heavy workload for review team members. I think it can lead to a very intense on-site process, but I say we do remind, and we do say you should put on your out of office, and you should say I will not, you know, I am away or I'm attending other meetings. But we all know ourselves that can be quite difficult to do, because it's very easy just to check in and you're remote working, and it's very difficult. And colleagues know, of course, that you are not traveling, that you were there, so it can be very difficult. But I think it's something perhaps we were not aware of in the first virtual reviews. We were very focused on the operational aspects, but we become much more aware of, from the duty of care also to the review team members, to ensure that they're not exhausted by the end of the week. So we do try to we are now highlighting it, which we had not done so in the past.
Yeah, that's I think it's a very good point. I think the same happened for the ENQA reviews. Some of you are also ENQA reviewers, and you've maybe taken part in an online visit. And, you know, it can be, it is exhausting. It's exhausting if you feel even the gaps. That's why we try now to preach to the experts, a break is a break. And that's not meant really for you to check your emails or make that call to the office, or to somebody who's also at home. But it is, of course, very difficult. So we can only preach that, show a good example, and try to promote that, I think, at the end. That leads to a second question, which was not directed to anybody specifically. It's about the body language and the non-verbal communication. I think that's, you know, in the first presentation from Aqua, we heard about that. So we only communicate with our face, but, you know, the position you are in, or even it's your face, you might be looking at another place. There are all kind of interesting features of that. Does anybody know of any research? Have you studied that in any way? That was the question. And I actually picked up a piece of research. I post a link to that. It's by the Greater Good Center from Berkeley. They have this happiness school there where they study features related to happiness. And there was an interesting very short article. It's very quick for you to read if you're interested. I shared that also with my colleagues and we talked about that. What is the impact of this Zoom? Why is it so exhausting? And I think it is partly related to the lack of non-verbal communication, and it's partly related to seeing your own face all the time. We didn't spend our days in front of a mirror, and now that's pretty much what happens. So, all kind of interesting impact. So you can have that's the best I can do to answer all to your question. But if there is anybody else who has any research, please feel free to share that in the chat.
Yeah. So
yeah,
Maria, maybe, thanks for your reference here in the chat, because it's true there are some articles and you can create some opinions, but it's really, I think it's really important because the body language is subconscious. You don't have to try to understand what the other person is trying to tell you. So it's quite easy to complement the words you are telling with the movement of the body. So especially for the people who are not used to the language, for example, now we're talking in English, but not all of us are born in an English country. So I think it could be a problem of not only about the meaning of a word, but maybe the nuance, the special meaning that you try to say something and it could be maybe not catch properly because of the other person. But also, I think it's very important also the customs of the country. For example, our reviewers, when we were dealing with this kind of online visits, many times we discuss about we can't feel the school, we can't feel the sounds, the smell of an institution. It's very important. So this kind of things is lost in this Zoom. Or we are talking about countries, for example, when you have to travel to another country, you see how the people moves or how the people deals one with each other. Now we change from my room here at my home, and in 1 second, maybe I'm talking with a person from Russia, and the communication is completely different. I don't have time enough to change my mind. So maybe it's important to read about the country and to try to take care of some little things like good illumination and try that your face is in the middle of the mirror, and I don't know, I speak slowly. Well, but I think it's a question to invest.
Yes, to be aware of that, I think that is really important. And I think also you touch upon another important thing, which is the transitions or the adaptation. When you travel to a different country, you have to take maybe the train to the airport, and then you are flying, you're on the plane, then you land in a different country with different temperature, different scenery, different food, different smells and sounds. And you already there realize I'm in someplace different. And I realized one day I was in the early morning in Asia, early afternoon in Africa, and later in the afternoon in Berlin. And, and everything happened just with a click of a new link. And that doesn't give the time to adjust and really get into who you are talking to. So we cannot solve this fully, but just to be a little bit mindful and aware of that. And I think also this might be one of the reasons why I don't think many of us would see the fully online as our ideal future either. And I think that leads us to kind of the big generic questions that we have. How do you see the future? Some of you touched upon that already, but maybe those who didn't, you'd like to elaborate. Has your agency already considered to what extent, if at all, you'll keep some of the elements into your online, into your review activities once you can do other things as well? So whoever would like to start. Yes, Maria Angeles.
Well, I think that the virtual visits are in a way complicated because all the questions you are dealing with, the body language, the adaptation, you have to attend the email, the conference, the visit, and so on. But and the other part of this problem or this situation is that for agencies, I think the dealing with virtual visits is much easier than the on-site visits. And I think that probably in the future we are going to keep some of the on-site visits, but a lot of virtual visits because the economic from the economic point of view and the easiness of dealing with that. And I think that we have to think about, because maybe it's not the right thing to do, or maybe yes, but we have to think about what to do really, what's the best.
Mm-hmm. Good. Is there Anka and then Aslian?
Thank you. Thank you, Maria. I think that there are two sides to this question, aren't they? Because one is about the methodology that agencies are applying in the way they have themselves adjusted to the online environment. And the other one is the side of the story that Lali and I touched on, the fact that universities, higher education institutions will probably increase their online delivery, and whether there is readiness, sufficient preparation being taken forward, especially in countries where online was not a predominant feature, whether that particular component is being cared for at this time, so that when those decisions are definitive by higher education institutions, that there already is comparable external quality assurance methodology in place that can look at the quality of education in that context. And I think one of the risks that we were particularly keen to highlight was the fact that many institutions do feel maybe overly confident about the fact that they can now do online, but actually that online is really a reflection of face-to-face having maybe been moved more or less mechanically into the online environment. So yes, we can be on Zoom and we can kind of deal with those things, and we can do classes and have the interaction with students, and we think, hey, we thought we couldn't do this beforehand. But the question really begs itself in terms of the agency: is this a measure of quality? Is this the right way that online education should be taken forward in the future? And it's being prepared to answer that question, which I think is already also very, very important for the agency and the dialogue that is happening between the agencies.
Anka, thanks. I think that's very important. That's really on the online learning rather than the site visits, but they are linked, of course. And I think what we did and what institutions did a year ago was just amazing. I mean, they managed to kind of save the situation. They have managed to salvage somehow the academic year, didn't fill the gap, firefight. I call it firefighting. That's what it was about. Let's make do with what we can. It's the plan B with the big B, I would say. But in the longer term, of course, we know that creating good online courses can take months, if not years, to really develop, thinking of that pedagogical model. How do you assess it? How do you ensure all the different learning outcomes, also the kind of transferable skills are acquired? All of that takes time and skill and specific thinking. So in the longer term, we have to be very careful about how to quality assure then also those two programs that remain online. In the longer term. Related to the future of the external quality assurance, going online, staying online, going back to face-to-face, elaborating different hybrid approaches, there was also a question about the carbon footprint. We could see that, the canals in Venice became clear water a year ago. The skies were blue, the pollution levels went down. And of course, that's something very positive. Now, perhaps we cannot really foresee a full return, staying in this state. But have your agencies considered this carbon footprint element when considering the future of external quality assurance and the format in which you'd like to carry that out in the future? Marie, yeah.
I suppose in short, yes, I think we are all very, very mindful and very conscious of the climate and the benefits that COVID have had in terms of the climate and the environment around us. And I suppose when you consider, if we look at our processes from the putting the review team together, the training to this on-site visit, there is quite a significant carbon footprint element. So we are certainly very mindful of that, and we haven't made any decisions, but we are certainly exploring elements of the process which would be very easily adaptable to the virtual process. I mean, some things we have missed the on-site. You do miss that socialization of the review, but it's been really, really interesting, I think, to see the outcomes of review processes and the efficacy of the process. The institutions are not questioning, and review teams are not questioning, and we are not questioning. So the EC is actually working very well. So we are missing elements. We have gained other benefits. So we now interact in terms of feedback. I mentioned we've been doing follow-up focus groups with learners, which in the past would not have been feasible for us to do. We wouldn't have thought of doing it virtually, and we didn't go to meet learners on site or other stakeholders post the review. From the training perspective, it's been much easier to get the review team together more frequently. So the shorter, more frequent meetings has worked really well, and the teams have actually built up a really good social dynamic by meeting more frequently in the work. So I think we would certainly be looking at that element of the preparation and the planning being perhaps done through the virtual methodology, and then the on-site. I'm not sure about the hybrid. We get mixed feedback on whether the hybrid, some of the team on site and some away. So I think what we would be doing would be either the whole team on site or the whole team virtual. But I think there are certainly elements that that work very well. And we've feedback from stakeholders, employers, industry, who say it's much easier to engage virtually. We did not have to drive 2 hours to meet a review team and then 2 hours back. So, there has been a lot of positive elements to the engagement. So yes, it's different, but I think there's been a lot of positive elements to the engagements. And I think we have to be really mindful of the sustainable element of all our processes over the next 10 or 20 years. So it's building external QA processes for sustainability and looking at how we can adapt to make them more sustainable. So we're not, we're not unique, and we're not immune to those impacts. So we're certainly looking at, I suppose, that sustainability element going forward.
I think this has kind of forced us to really think about that, because it's so easy when you're doing something and you've always done it that way, just to keep going without really questioning it. And having been forced to do that, we've realized that some things can be done very well online. And we've also realized that some things are better done face-to-face if it's possible. And I think, perhaps more than hybrid in the sense of people being in different places. I think that is always a little bit more complicated, particularly the panel, I think, should probably always be together when that's possible. But perhaps what we are thinking of at ENQA for the agency reviews is that part of the process surely can be done, like Marie would say, some of the preparatory meetings, not everything has to be face-to-face, etc. So we can probably do something with that. And you mentioned efficiency. I think that's the one thing that we have not been compromising very much. I think everything online, it's to the borderline of being a bit too efficient. So you go into a meeting, okay, let's go to business, bye. And so eventually it is the human element, it's the cultural experience that might be missing rather than the efficiency of the process. So I think we've been seeing a lot of that.
Maria,
Yeah.
Now, actually, we encountered with a problem, and I just want to hear the opinions of our colleagues at this point. Now, we try to integrate international experts and evaluators to our teams, and the major obstacle that we encounter with is that actually because of time zone differences. it becomes extremely difficult to do this. Now, I think the major problem, while getting the ideas, expressions, or the opinions of our international evaluators during these team meetings is to integrate them. But we know that we put a lot of weight on their shoulders as well, and it becomes very difficult to adopt all these things while online platforms bring some flexibility in terms of meeting more frequently, but in the sense of international evaluators or experts, it becomes a little difficult. So I think one of the obstacles that may endure in the following years will be related with this if we will continue under these pandemic conditions. I don't know whether what my colleagues think about this issue.
Is there anybody who would like to respond to that or share their experiences briefly?
I don't mind.
Yeah, Mary.
I think we have experienced the same challenges, and it has certainly impacted on the jurisdictions from which we would invite or select external experts. So we did conduct a review team where our chair was in a 5-hour different time zone. So it meant we could not start until lunchtime every day, the team meetings, and then they ran until later in the evening, and it ran over a 2-week period. It worked, but it was not ideal, and the institution, it seemed to go on a long time from the institution's perspective. So yeah, I mean, I mentioned we're currently working with our vocational education training providers, and we had hoped to perhaps invite some chairs from the community colleges in the States, but it's just not very practical to do that with the time zone. So I think that it is a challenge, undoubtedly. I think it is.
There's somebody else who wants to share on that experience? Not really. Okay, good. So maybe the very final question for the last few minutes we have left. We go back to who are the key actors in this review process, so the reviewers. And there is a combination of questions. One is about, do you need a specific type of reviewers different from the usual ones to do online processes? The one is, do you have special requirements for students who take part in online reviews? And then, of course, the big question of training. We've heard a lot of specific training already, but if somebody wants to add on why and what kind of specific training is very important in this situation. So the experts, what is special about them in this context? Akfua, would you like to share something on that? You have your 10 commandments, which are valid for all of us, but also for the experts. Have you detected some kind of special profile or need?
Yeah, well, it's quite. I think we are on the way of trying to give an answer, because it's true that the situation has arrived suddenly. So to choose this Zoom, for example, is not an election. It's a duty. We have to manage with this. And I think that the character, many times some people are more expressive or more talkative, and this could help to make an environment more kind. I'll try to explain. For example, in some kind of business, we'll have to avoid the feeling that we are I don't know, in making hard questions to the interviewers. It's more a chat, because this kind of, you have to ask and I have to answer. So maybe, I don't know, if I would have to give an advice, maybe it's just to keep calm, to try to be comfortable, because if you're feeling comfortable, you transmit this feeling too. And of course, preparation for reviewers, of course, the training must necessarily deal with technical issues, but also with, I think, this kind of patient and smiling in order to create a comfortable environment for us all. Yeah.
I'll wait for anybody to show a hand if they'd like to comment on that. Anka, good, and Jolanta. What we noticed at ENQA was that we really need a different motivation. A lot of our reviewers were motivated by the excitement of being together in a different place, different country, travel, etc. And now it is, let's say, just the work. And it's a funny point, but the motivation has to be really strong, and there has to be a very strong commitment as well. So briefly, Anka, and then Jolanta.
Thank you, Maria. Just to point out from kind of the experience of the reviewer or in that particular position or chair, I think one of the things that I realize, and this is back to what Eva was saying, is that there has to be much less of the talking, smiling, this, that, and much more of this is what needs to happen. Here are points A, B, and C. We have to go through this. We only have this amount of time. So you feel slightly, sorry, I'm using this word, slightly dictatorial as a chair in trying to even clarify the responsibilities and what needs to happen by when and how and whom. Because once you click on leave meeting, you have no way of checking whether colleagues have understood exactly, will they deliver, is there anything left unanswered? So you feel a little bit depersonalized, I would say, as part of the process. And to me, this is specifically driven by the fact that there seems to be a stronger sense of insufficient clarity about how the roles and the responsibilities are discharged in this new environment. And it's unfortunate, and we get through the task. I think we do get through the task, and we get through it successfully, but it's that personal element that is almost completely lost. And I think we were all thriving on that previously. Which is why this sense of loss, I guess, somewhere.
Yeah.
So thank you. I just thought I'd raise that.
It is about this efficiency focus as well. Jolanta.
Yes, I would like to add just some points which are very important for experts in nowadays, for assessment experts. It's ability and knowledge how to work with information technology tools. And we have used different platforms, and we saw that not always experts or university staff is able to work with these tools, and is this very important. And what else we have learned is that we all, including experts and the agency and the university, should be flexible, to have ability to react on different situations, and to be patient, and also experts in their feedback, all experts emphasizes that virtual visits do not give impression or feeling of the spirit of university. This is much missing, and therefore experts mostly would like to have face-to-face visits just to feel this university.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. That's a really good point. And I think I would finally share a little bit from the ENQA experience, which has been, we've really noticed as well that we jumped into the efficient mode. Okay, we start the meeting and everything had an agenda, and we very quickly realized that we had to organize these little pre-meetings, a little chat. Now we kind of start the site visit perhaps with people just taking, the experts, each one taking a picture of where they are working, sharing that. You know where the people are, you see their desk, oh, there's a coffee cup, and behind them they have that or this, and it gives a kind of more human dimension. And also we are sending what we normally would take the experts to a dinner and then a lunch, and we'd spend a lot of also kind of informal time together, is that we have this survival package that we prepare for the experts, and we send to them to their home address, which has of course the documents and the guidelines and all kind of technical material, but then also a box of chocolates or biscuits and something. And so even the fact that they sit there, or each one in their own home, and eat the same chocolates. Make them somehow, you know, feel that they are together, they are part of the team. So even little things like that can be quite nice and bring the team together. Okay, we have come to the end of our webinar. I would like to very much thank all the presenters, because it's a bit of an effort to put together your quick poster, like a snapshot speed dating presentation. And it has been very useful and interesting to hear from so many different dimensions. And I would like to thank all the 50 or so participants that have taken part in today's webinar. Wish you a wonderful rest of the day, a good rest of the week, and all the best. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you all.
Thank you.